Yo, 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 what's good, YouTube? What's good? This is Stormy B Man, and I am back welcoming all of you to another edition of the Three Wise Men of Boxing for this Thursday, April 30th, 2020, the last day of the month. And we've got a great show for you this evening. We're calling it Ring Entrances and Wardrobes. All right. And I want to introduce my co-hosts for the show this evening. We got Scrapbook Boxing. How you doing, Scrapbook?
I'm good, Stormy. How you doing, my brother? What's going on, chat?
I'm doing very good, my brother. And we got Kurt Anderson, a.k.a. Kurt Sugar. How you doing, Kurt?
Hey, Stormy, what's going on, man? I'm doing fantastic, man. I feel real good. Spirits is up, man. You know, thinking about boxing, watching boxing. What's up, Scrapbook, man? That's my brother right there. Boy, both of my brothers. What's up, chat? You know, we got a great show for you tonight. We're going to bring you some interesting things.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Want to tell everybody that's out there, thank you for joining us. Smash that like button as you come in, people. I know people are still just getting those notifications. Even though we put that reminder out early, and we're excited to be before you again. Tonight's show is going to be a little bit of a different show where we're going to cover some aspects of the sport of boxing that people often remember and they talk about in conversation. And we're going to do it before you and bring you into the conversation, the listening audience, as well as we recount the events of boxing where there were interesting and breathtaking or astonishing ring entrances, wardrobes that fighters wore coming in to their matches. And it's something that we often, sometimes we can talk about it in person to person. You're having a conversation, recalling the fight. Hey, you remember this or you remember that? Well, we're doing that with you guys this evening. So that's what the show is about this evening. And I hope that you get a chance to enjoy it. And also mention in the chat your recounts and recollections of some of these events that took place in the sport. I would like to pass the mic to the brothers and let them get it kick started. Scrapbook, what do you have to say about the sport of boxing and how it becomes an event when we have particular stars in the sport who have taken time and pride in their appearance and their approach as they come out on their big nights?
Well, boxing has always, believe it or not, been like that since the gladiator days. And then it kind of tapered away from that when they just started coming into organ music. And they just had the traditional black robes or white robes with black trunks or white trunks. But then it started picking up in the 70s. And it was somewhat of a thank you to the audience, making those fashion statements and those ring entrances. And I'll tell you, it's nothing like going to a championship match and the anticipation on where the fighter is going to wear, how he's going to come out, the type of music he's going to dance to, or whatever the case is. Sometimes they have fireworks. It's just amazing. It's amazing. It brings, I'll say, icing to the cake. It's a beautiful thing to witness, especially when you're there ringside.
Yes, indeed. How about you, Kurt? What does it do to you to have that be a part of the sport, having witnessed so many of the legendary matches over time and everything, the stock that you take in when the fighters come out and they present themselves?
Well, a non-boxer really, he factors in. His name was Gorgeous George, who Ali copied his style. When you see a boxer come out in fancy robes and music, it's almost like a wrestler because that's what wrestlers do. My take is it a little different, so it transcended to boxing. When you look at Hector Camacho, that's something a wrestler would do. Adrian Broner, that's something a wrestler would do. Ron, rapping into the ring himself or having somebody come out, that seems to be the norm in boxing, a rapper having a rapper or a band, like Pernell Whitaker did. The anticipation of a fight, and you don't have to be loud, but I understand it though. And the anticipation of a fight take care of all that, because you've seen it on March 8th, 1971, when Ali with that beautiful red robe and Joe Frazier with that lime green robe. Those robes were ahead of his time. People wasn't coming out like that, but Joe liked to dress. Joe used to dress back in the day. Him and Walt Frazier, I used to see pictures of both of them, the hats, the Cordevilles, and that's Colt. And, the trench coats looking like John Shaft. But, when you have a fight that's a super fight, it's just the anticipation alone is intensity, man. It's about, you don't know what's going to happen. The anticipation is a powerful tool, because your mind is going crazy and you're thinking about what the first round is going to be, who's going to land the first punch. The press conferences be, lit up, man, like the 4th of July, and fighters, bobbing their head or just coming in with those large entourages. It's just, there's no sport like boxing, and I'm being fair because I'm the biggest sports fan in the world, man. Hockey, soccer, baseball, you know it. I mean, you name it, I know it. And, there's nothing like two fighters entering a ring when it comes to the sport of boxing. Nothing like it.
And to piggyback off of what you were just saying, Kurt, and you mentioned Ali with that beautiful red robe trimmed in white that he came in against Frazier in their first fight. And Frazier, though he had that green, don't forget the gold. It was green and gold trim that he wore. That was really, it stood out, because like you said, most fighters would come out in the plain black, white stripe, white, black stripe, trunks and gloves and shoes and everything. And these gentlemen began to add and pun intended, I guess, color to their events. And it was nice that it took place in that fight in particular, because being the super fight that it was, it kind of kicked things off going forward. And then you begin to see even more and more fighters ply their trade of coming out and looking good, so to speak. Remember when George Foreman challenged for the world title against Joe Frazier, he came out with his traditional trunks with the blue band and white stripes. So he was basically wearing those red, white, and blue, carrying over from the Olympics, and it's like subtle things like that, but that became George's trademark, those red, white, and blue trunks, Scrapbook, can you take us back to the date when Ali came out and he had that wonderful robe on that was donated to him by Elvis Presley?
Oh, absolutely. March 8th, 1971. It was probably to this day the most exhilarating event. Now, 1970, when Ali faced Jerry Quarry, that was the pimp era. That's when you had everybody come out with the minks and everything else. But that night on March 8th, I got to tell you, man, when he came out with that robe, that was, no one's ever seen anything like that. And that was his first real comeback back into Madison Square Garden on a big stage. And to see him coming with that robe was a thing to behold. Joe Frazier came out with the Kelly green and gold robe. And it was short. It wasn't the traditional long robe. So you had a lot of things going on that evening. But Ali, man, I got to tell you, that was something else. Now, you're showing the picture here with the white robe. he was something else, man. Muhammad Ali was way ahead of his time. He had the white shoes and he had that white long robe and he had People's Champ in the back. That's what I'm talking about. That's exactly what I'm talking about. When you have two main event guys come out and they bless you with the theatrics before the event actually occurs, goose pimples and the chills that go up and down your spine is what's actually happening, especially when you're close, second row, third row. It's nothing like it, man. It's nothing like it. But Ali, he kind of started that. But Johnny Bratton, back in 1952, he came out with the Johnny and a big giant bee in the back of his robe. That's never been done before. So you had quite, traditions. But Muhammad Ali, he started it, in my opinion.
And those tassels on his shoes, someone mentioned it in the chat. Let's not forget that. Ali dancing around the ring with those tassels from his boxing shoes. That just, grace. Kurt, what are your recollections of Ali, the tassels, the baubles and everything, especially that robe that was donated by Elvis? I mean, what do you have on there? Diamonds, emeralds, jewels, bombs? What was that?
I think that was rhinestones.
Rhinestone.
It said yes, it said the people's choice on the back. But let me just, make a pit stop to Jake LaMotta. And I almost forgot, but he had like a tiger-like robe that was real sharp, back in the 40s. It was like, when you look at the stripes of a tiger, that was a pretty robe he had. It was before his time. But getting back to Ali with not only the red and white robe he wore against Frazier, but the white terry cloth robe. Ali was what you call a pretty fighter. He fought pretty. He looked pretty. So that's why he used to call himself, I'm pretty, like a girl, which is hilarious, but he was tough, and certain fighters like Sugar Ray Leonard with the tassels and used to take his glove and brush his hair back. They really believed that they were pretty, even if the feet, they was pretty. So it was part of their chemical makeup, but Ali, that Elvis Presley robe, if anybody ever seen it, you can Google it. It was beautiful, man. And so much for people saying he was a racist, Elvis Presley, because he gave Red Fox a beautiful diamond ring and Ali a robe that said the people's choice. Guys like Ali, man, is just a once in a lifetime generational fighter, but his style, he was just different. But my favorite scene is him walking into the ring with Frazier with the red and white tassels and the white shoes and the beautiful, loud red and white robe. That was beautiful, man. To me, it's like almost the pinnacle of boxing lore.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Scrapbook, can you tell us what it meant for certain fighters to be on the opposing end of that? Because since these wonderful champions would come out and present themselves to the audience in attendance in this manner, when at that time, this was being a trend-setting ordeal. What kind of impression and reflection was that on the opponents? Did it intimidate them greater? Because, that's something that we don't think about, but it had to have some type of impression.
Well, it can work either way. I remember an example, fighter by the name of Anthony Hemrick, 1988 Olympian. He was late for his showing, and he never made he never had the opportunity to fight. That was his first strike. Second strike was that evening when he fought a fighter by the name of Booker T. Ward. He was a last-minute replacement. And he came in and did probably the best dance routine since Motown. Had it going perfectly until he got tapped on the chin. And then he did another dance. And that dance didn't work out for him. But it could work for the opponent because it motivates the opponent. Or it could do the opposite. It can intimidate the opponent. But that evening with Anthony Hemrick, Booker T. Ward showed you that it can motivate the opponent. I know you guys remember that evening.
Oh, man, that was Tuesday Night Fights, man. I'll never forget it. I forever remember Booker T. Ward's name for winning that fight the way he did and putting Hambrick in the Hall of Shame. But let's listen to Kurt recount that fight.
Yeah, because Booker T. Ward is like a water bug, man. He get down low, and he had a lot of power. Anthony Hembrick had the tassels. He tried to be pretty. See, that's the difference. Ali didn't have to try Sugar Ray Leonard, but Anthony Hembrick, he wanted to be a stylist, and it didn't work out for him, man. He was highly touted, and the fight was supposed to just been a warm up. Get this bum out the way, Booker T. Ward. That fight, caught my attention because of his name, Booker T. When a dude have a name like that, you're gonna be like, let me see what he working with, and surprise, surprise. Surprise, surprise. He beat the hell out of Anthony Hembrick. For some reason, I don't got nothing against Hembrick, but I just think that he tried too hard to be pretty. You shouldn't try to be something. That's just like we used to say, self-praise is no praise at all. You got to earn that. Remember something, and I want to throw this curveball in here. When Shane Mosley was coming up in the ranks and he had the name Sugar Shane, people were scoffing about him using that name. He had to earn it. And you know what? He did, because that name Sugar is royalty. So you have to be a very good fighter to carry that moniker, man, that name. So, he had to earn it. And it's just like boxing. My friends used to be like, he coming in with tassels, and, we'd be at a fight party and be like, he's a bum. He can't fight. Listen, when you have tassels to your boxing shoes and all this fancy stuff, you better, you better be a very good fighter, or people gonna look down on you. It's weird how that happens and relates to the fan, because that's the first thing they will say. He's a bum. Take them tassels off. That's what's holding them back. Take them white gloves off and the sparkles and rhinestones and all that crap. Take it off. You got to be a good fighter. You got to earn that. So it's weird how that happens, but it happens.
One of the guys that I always remembered that had that whole attention to the audience thing going on was a guy by the name of Jorge Paez. And he used to have haircuts, Batman one time, and another time he'll have Pokemon, and he was just something else. But he had the long robe. Sometimes he'd come out with a fur coat with a hoodie. He was something else. You guys remember him?
Yeah, I remember him.
His name was
he was fighting Curtis Troy Dorsey. And when he came out that evening, he was flashing the gold, man. He had on that long robe with the fur coat. And I don't know if he had the Batman haircut that day, but he came out styling, man.
Yep.
Yeah, I remember him. He was an acrobat from his family had a carnival. He fought Calvin Grove, and they used to call him Mero. That means clown or something like that. And Spanish, I believe. So I could be wrong, but I remember him very well.
Yeah, he took haircuts to a new level. Remember, he got so many different styles and things cut into his hair that people began to do it in culture, in pop culture. It's like he set a trend, and some of his robes and dress for ring attire became that type of thing. I remember he was one of the originals to wear what looks like, in other words, it looks like a skirt or a waist poncho, but he would have these, pleats in them and with the colors mixed inside. So like when he gave movement and it flared, it would show different colors. And it was a distraction for opponents too, because it's like, these guys coming out here with the stuff, sequins and stuff like that. But it added to their aura and their mystique when these guys got creative like that. And we saw a small boom of this type of appearance and approach to the ring when these guys began to come out like that. You could actually recall Hector Camacho, coming out doing similar things. When Camacho came out, I remember the first time that he came out to that. I forget which fight it was. It might have been Pazienza, I think. But when he came out with the Indian chief look, remember that? And he came out and he was like dancing around, and he had this long feathery thing going on. It was like he was a real character in himself, Hector Camacho, but you can't deny he was never dull on his ring entrances and the attire that he would wear to the event.
Yeah, that was the Vinny Pazienza fight at Atlantic City. I was at that fight, and he had the Indian headpiece, and he had his belt, around his waist. But Camacho, I remember when he fought Bazooka Limon. He fought him in Puerto Rico because Bobby Chacon got stripped from his belt. He was supposed to face Camacho. He didn't want to go to Puerto Rico. So they allowed Bazooka Limon to come in. And that's the first time I really noticed Camacho that way. He had this leopard skin shorts. Nobody ever had that before. But Camacho, I'll tell you, he was something else, man. Camacho probably was the best out of all of them when it came down to ring entrances, and he would do his dance with his different outfits, as you see him here. That was the Vinny Pazienza fight, I believe. Amazing.
But I'll tell you something. It did make for theater. You know what I'm saying? It's like to see this guy come in there, because guess what? There's a fight that's taking place after this. So if you coming in there, you got the gall to come in there like that, you better be able to thump. You know what I'm saying? Because you don't want to be embarrassed. Now, there have been fighters who've been embarrassed to come in with all of that, and that's all they had. So when the bell rang, it was over. Talk to us about this, fellas, and get the listening audience in on that, because I'm sure you can recount some of those instances that I just talked about.
Well, I'm going to tell you some crazy ring entrances that people may not know or forgot about. It just reminds me sitting on the couch with my father, his work pants on, my father was like really muscular, That's why I was intimidated by him, Calvin, as I affectionately call him. So Dad, Calvin, whatever. White beater with a tattoo, and he used to have his beard and curly afro, and he used to be like, that boy got knocked out cold as a milkshake. That was one of his favorite sayings. I'm laughing because I'm imagining him behind me. Beside me. I live, with boxing, I lived through my father. I lived, through boxing, thinking about my father, as I should say. But anyway, there was a fighter named Alfredo Escalera who used to have a python around his body when he entered the ring. He fought the great Alexis Arguello, and the fight was called the Bloody Battle of Bayamon, Puerto Rico. But the Bloody Battle of Bayamon. And I remember he beat the hell out of Escalera. He beat him so bad, my father said, the snake is crying. He said the poor snake is crying, and I remember another entrance where, Danny Little Red Lopez, a fantastic fighter, a puncher. Man, can Danny Little Red Lopez punch? He fought the great Salvador Sanchez, and when Sanchez beat him to a pulp, he took his the Indian, what they call them, the
Indian headdress.
These went up headdress, right? He took it off and gave it to Salvador Sanchez. My father started cracking up laughing. But those are ring entrances. I remember. I remember this one, and this was probably the weirdest one. There was a fighter named Wilbur Johnson. They used to call him Wilbur Vampire Johnson. He used to come in to the ring with the Count Dracula robe on, black on the outside, red on the inside, and stuff. And I remember he got knocked out. And my father said, you can go back, to your coffin. my father,
yeah, I remember that.
Was hilarious, man. So those are things as a kid or growing up. I remember my father always saying something funny, having me cracking up, drinking a 7-Up. Yeah, so I just wanted to relive those memories, man, through my father talking about these crazy ring entrances.
Well, man, I got a couple myself, man. Yeah, but
no, I was just gonna say, man, Kurt, your father had some good ones, man. Those lines he would say. Go ahead, Scrap.
1 second before Scrap go, we don't use curse on this channel or excuse me, use, language, certain type of language. But I have to say this. When we saw Mark Breland fight Darrell Anthony gave Mark Breland his only loss as an amateur. Breland was 110-1. And then they fought at, we used to call it Lou Duvas, but it was his brother, Dan Duvas, Ice World in Totowa, New Jersey, and when Mark Breland came out, my father looked at me and his brothers. He said, "That's a Cadillac nigga right there," because he was long and skinny. When you look at a Cadillac, he would call people like Tommy Hearns, Mark Breland, fighters like that, Bob Foster, long and lean.
Yeah.
If he would have saw Wilder, he would have called him that too. So I just wanted to talk about that, man.
Great stuff. Go ahead, Scrap. You were going to say something.
Yeah. One of the best ring entrances I've seen, witnesses personally, was Corey Spinks when he fought Zab Judah. And he brought in Nelly. And I got to tell you, that was the good performance, man. Very good performance. First time I've ever seen anything like that before my life. St. Louis. That was a very good performance. I don't know if you guys remember that one. But another one I was at Radio City Music Hall, and I saw David Telesco when he fought Roy Jones. And he came in with the Rockettes. And Redman and Method Man, their mics were not working. But if those mics were working, that would have been something else. But that was on Roy Jones' birthday. And Arthur McCanty, I think he had just turned 80 years old. Amazing. I remember that. Remember that one?
I remember it too. And I was trying my damnedest to find some footage of that I could incorporate in here, and I wasn't able to find it. So, not in motion. I wanted to use it like as a GIF or something like that, but I couldn't find it. But yeah, I remember that Radio City Music Hall. Roy came out. He was dancing, man. He had on one of those custom-made two-piece attire that he would wear that kind of had the oriental collar, but he would come out like, and he was dancing that night. And I forget that night was his birthday, but he made a show of it that night, and he made a show in the ring as well. His performance was really amped up. That was when Roy was in the midst of that streak of his career where he was Superman-like, his performances. He was so fast, and he had that combination of speed and power and everything. And it was also during that ego era when he made that song, Y'all Must Have Forgot, and he was doing all of that stuff.
Yes.
Roy was the man back then, boy. He was, and he could do it in that ring, What are you brothers' recollection of Roy? Before you answer, I'm gonna just throw this out there. Do you remember when he came out to fight James Toney and his ring robe was like a tuxedo? Man, he looked sharp in that. It was white and black.
Absolutely.
And then he came to the ring playing Bones Thug and Harmony, and it was cold, man. I ain't gonna lie. Roy was hot that night, bro.
I was getting ready to say the tuxedo robe, and he had a black one on against somebody else. Was it Brian? No, it wasn't Brian Brandon. It was Suede. But Roy had some nice gear, man. He had the Michael Jordan boxing shoes and, color coordinated, but Roy with the tux, man, that was nice touch. I never seen that before. That was like a real nice tux. But I like when fighters fight in their hometown and they come out with the team. It could be a football team. Corey Spinks used to come out with the St. Louis Cardinal gear. Remember that, y'all? Red and white. He used to always have St. Louis Cardinals gear on, representing St. Louis, man. But I was getting ready to say, about Roy Jones tuxedo, man. They be having people who custom make their outfits. And I remember, Pernell Whitaker coming out, I ain't going to go too far, coming out, with the band. That was a nice touch, man. It was different. Even, Tank Davis, when he did the Thriller thing, I thought that was cool, man. So boxers, they're very, they're innovative, man. And even Fury, when he came out there with the crown, though people don't want to hear it, but I said to myself at the end of the fight, the way he came out, it was like a coronation.
Hey, it was.
And I was like, it's weird how that happened, man. But those are just some of the crazy, stuff we have, man. We talk about the sport of boxing.
Yeah, that tux look that he had on the night he fought James Toney, man. And like I said, I hadn't seen anybody come to the ring like that no more. Prior to that, but that was Roy's coming out night too. Remember, because Roy was like that young upstart. Like you could say, right now today, you got a guy like a Devin Haney, right? And he's coming up, but he's got to prove himself against somebody. And so James Toney was that fighter because he was in the midst of his prime and he was beating people and defending and he was winning all kinds of ways. He fought as a throwback and this and that. And here comes Roy, who kind of is like the jet set new era fighter or whatever. And can he do it? And he came out, he wore his tux and he put on a performance that night. And Tony wasn't able to keep up with that. And it just, that's a fight that stuck in my memory, about their careers, because at the moment where he needed to be at his best the most, Jones was prepared. And James Toney was he took a different type of approach to the fight. And that's not Roy's fault, but he looked good that night. I can't take nothing away from RJ, man. He looked the part that night. Scrapbook, why don't you tell us a little bit more about that night and that fight?
Oh, James Toney and Roy Jones?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, Roy Jones, you never knew exactly what you was going to get with Roy Jones in terms of his ring entrances, in terms of his hoopla. But that night with James Toney, man, James Toney was, he was just a menacing figure, man. He was a menacing figure. He was undefeated coming into that fight. Both guys were undefeated. And James Toney, he used to walk around with a black mink coat, a full-length black mink coat with a hat to match. Most of the times I saw him. But when Roy Jones got in that ring that evening, I had a feeling he was going to win that fight because it just seemed like, I think I mentioned this to you once before about James Toney. He's a head fighter. You can get into his head very easily. And Roy Jones did that night. And just the way he was warming up in the locker room and the way he came out and he was dancing around, oh, man, that was beautiful. But that was a good night. That was a good night of boxing. A very good night of boxing. But Roy Jones definitely, he won the hoopla that night. No question about it.
Kurt, did you want to add something to that?
Yeah, well, that fight, I was actually going for James Toney. I was very disappointed in his performance. He wasn't in the fight mentally or physically, but that's not Roy's fault. Roy was at his best. Sometimes on certain nights, everything comes together, fighter. The way he looked, he entered the ring from confidence. He's in the fight physically and mentally. So he performed like that, the chicken move and all that, and Toney wasn't. So that's Toney's fault. Toney's, lack of consistency because of his weight. You fight a guy like James Toney, who's highly anticipated. You're supposed to be at your very best, but he wasn't. And Roy took advantage of that, so everything went right for Roy, because after the fight, people was like, you see what he did to James Toney? That put Roy on another level, and I was like, wow, I was very surprised. And I became a huge Roy Jones fan, but, it was just one of those things, man. His role was sharp, and, it was his night. So, you remember a fighter, his best performances, and that was a great night for Roy Jones Jr.
Even depicted in this photo that I have up currently, where he went with a sleeveless robe, with the Jordan brand. Roy has style too, man. It's like, in his attire, coming to the ring, he wasn't ordinary when it came down to that either. And got to have a lot of respect for him, because he carried himself as a champion. Once he became a champion, he carried himself as a champion at all times. And regardless of whether you care for his speech and bravado and everything, at least you knew he could deliver in the ring, and he upheld that. And I do feel, upon reflection of his career, that disqualification loss and everything, and even looking back further early in his career, what happened in Korea in the Olympics, it's a shame, because such a fighter like that deserves to go out the regular way that a fighter would go out. And they took that loss from him in the time now where the O means so much to these guys today, right? His was, his O was snatched from him unfairly. And, I know that's always been a bitter pill for him, but much respect to the guy. He brought style and flair to the game.
Well, I want to say about a ring entrance that really got me. I was in the 8th row in 1985, the Thomas Hearns and Marvin Hagler fight. And Marvin Hagler, he came out to War, the song War, and he was bouncing from side to side with his hoodie on. The anticipation that night, I still feel this moment as I'm speaking to you. Never felt anything like that. When he was coming down the aisle to the song War, and he was bouncing side to side with the hoodie on. Oh, that was unbelievable. Unbelievable evening. That was a great ring entrance as far as I'm concerned.
Absolutely. See, a ring entrance doesn't have to be over the top of fancy. It's just the fighters, it could be a bob, like Hagler used to, you couldn't see his face, you could just see him bobbing left or right. It's the intensity, because, like I said, Leonard Hearns, watching boxing for like 46 years, I never seen a ring entrance like that. You probably say to yourself, it wasn't nothing fancy about it. But I used to think about that fight in high school when I got home in the shower eating around about like August. And the fight was September 16th, 1981. That's all me and my friends talked about. We didn't talk about anything else. So the fight consumed me, swallowed me whole. And when my father said, come and get you, I said, it's about to go down. And I said, don't forget the tickets, Dad. He said, I won't, because my father lived separately at that time, And when we went to the Capitol Theater in Passaic, New Jersey, the town over from Patterson, and when we gave the guy the ticket, and when we walked through those doors, all you heard was bedlam. All you heard was mass hysteria. People betting, got their money out, $20, $50, $100 bills in their hand. I got Hearns at 9. People blurting out the rounds. As a kid, man, that was powerful to me. And I said, this is something I would never forget. And sitting down in the undercard, and because at that time, people didn't get up on the undercard. They got up between fights, because that's how much people respected boxing. They watched the whole card. And when your Leonard come on, you hear boos and cheers. And when Hearns, a lot of people cheered, but the ring entrances, man, was something that I would never forget. I'm just very slowly going over that special night. And I said, I wonder if I will ever experience anything like this again. And then they showed Leonard with the red and white robe coming in, because both of them had large entourages. And I just would never see anything like that. As a person who loved multiple sports and have vast knowledge of multiple sports, there would never be another ring entrance, because before the ring entrance, the press conference, when Leonard said, upside your head, bop, 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 and Hearns backed his chair up and looked at him and said, just give me one shot. And everybody was like, ooh, ah, ooh, ooh. Yeah. I could not believe this fight. I said, this fight was about to happen. So the anticipation of a super fight, it lives up to everything. Fights like Mayweather and Pacquiao, that was a super fight, didn't live up to expectation. Trinidad and De La Hoya didn't live up. The fight didn't live up to expectations, but Leonard and Hearns did, and I will never forget it.
Can I say something about what you just said, Kurt, about like Pacquiao and Mayweather didn't live up to it? This is what I have to offer on that. They didn't fight when they were supposed to fight. That fight was 5 years too late. That fight was supposed to take place when it was hot, just like when Aaron Pryor faced Alexis Arguello. See, that's the difference in what we have to help the audience understand, the significance of fighting and striking while the iron is hot. Yes, somebody is going to lose. It doesn't matter who you support. But what's important is that we get the fights, because look how wonderfully, and we're only 40 minutes into our show, look how wonderfully we are recalling these events and these fighters. These fighters that we're talking about thus far all faced each other and faced the opponents, and these events took place in their primes. We're not talking about guys who were fighting 34 plus, 32 plus, We're talking about guys who were still in their 20s and just approaching the 30s, And how wonderful was that? How old was Ali and Frazier when they fought for the first time?
Yeah, it was in their mid to late 20s.
Yeah, Frazier was 29. I think Ali was 30. So it's like... No, Ali might have been 29 and Frazier might have been 28, something like that. Because I know when Ali fought Foreman, he was 32.
Yeah, they was in their late 20s for sure.
Yeah. So you think about that. They weren't fighting, elder statesmen like they were in their primes. So people got to understand and get out of that foolishness of let it marinate, listening to those foolish promoters who are taking you. They're taking you down that dark path because all they want to do is pad their pockets. And the fighters need to realize that too. But they need to have they need to have the real events while they can.
Yeah, I got to tell you, a fight that I attended was a fight with Salvador Sanchez and Wilfredo Gomez. And Curtis and I, we just talked about that recently, about the marching, the bands, the battle of the bands. Curtis, talk about that, man. That was an unbelievable ring entrance and a good start to an outstanding fight.
Wilfredo Gomez is tied with Deontay Wilder for 32 consecutive knockouts. Wilfredo Gomez has the record with 17 knockouts and title defenses. Wilfredo Gomez was an animal. Certain fighters are animals. Marvin Hagler, Chavez, Tyson, the list, go on and on. And he was known as the guy who was beating all Mexican fighters, Lupe Pintor, Carlos Zarate, Juan Kid Mesa. So the Mexicans say, hey, we got one for you. His name is Salvador. Because Gomez was the favorite. Salvador Sanchez wasn't known. That was his coming out party. And Salvador Sanchez was a long, lean fighter who was a master counterpuncher. He had long arms. You know, he could box like a dream. You know, I think his record ended up as 49-1-1. You know, died tragically in a car accident. One of the very best fighters you ever see. And that fight was called Battle of the Little Giants. It paved the way for the lighter weight divisions. And then, you know, boxing fans kind of turned their back on the lighter weight division. It just won't, it will catch fire for a little while, and then the fire will go out. Because Prince Nassim did the same thing. And people forget Prince Nassim had a Adidas deal. That's why he wore the trunks and the shoes. You know, and that's very rare for a fighter and a fighter with in the lighter weight divisions. But getting back to Sanchez and Gomez, you know, when they came out, they had dueling bands. The national music in Mexico is mariachi, and the national music for Puerto Rico is called salsa. And it was only 5,000 people, but you would though it was 100,000 people was going crazy. It's the passion. It's not the size of the crowd. It's the passion, you know, and the ring entrances was crazy with Salvador Sanchez coming out, light blue robe, light blue trunks, and I believe it was light blue. Was it light blue robe? I know the trunks was light blue. Trunks was light blue.
Light blue robe. Yes, it was, with the afro.
Yes, right. And Roberto Gomez, you know, I used to love them Puerto Rican, the flag trunks he used to wear, man. I just love the old Mexican trunks that's Canelo wore against Mayweather, and the Puerto Rican, you know, flag trunks that Gomez wore, you know. And, you know, I'm not going to talk about the fight, but only the ring entrance. And, you know, that fight is one of my favorite fights. It's in my top 10. And I'm going to look at that fight tomorrow, maybe tonight, probably tomorrow, you know. But it was, when I say a fight live up to expectations, like Leonard Hearn, everything went right with that fight. You know, the outcome, it was exciting. It was dramatic. You know, the ring entrances, everything. So that's one of the fights. If you haven't seen that fight, go and watch that fight from the beginning.
Yeah, I was sitting right behind Larry Holmes. Larry Holmes was calling the fight. And I was close to the aisleway. I can't even explain the excitement. When they were coming down the aisle, and they got into the ring, and they just bumped into each other. And then the band started going at it. It was crazy. It was unbelievable. It was actually amazing. Amazing. A very, very good night of boxing. But that was one of the best entrances I've seen in my time in watching boxing.
Yeah, great recount of that, fellas. And that's a great segue into another Mexican fighter who has some pretty exciting ring entrances himself from the Mexican perspective, and that was Julio Cesar Chavez. You know, he would have bands playing for him too, mariachi bands and everything, and Chavez actually grew to cult-like status with his fan base. And today, you know, I guess they would call them Chavez tards or something like that. But it's like, he had a following, and it was entertaining watching that, you know, as you reflect back upon it, because people came to life when they got behind somebody they could support. And he was one of those type of fighters like that. And had, you know, Salvador Sanchez lived longer, he probably would have developed that within himself. But there was a shift that kind of helped Chavez's career, because that MTV era and everything that he kind of like came along at that time, and also like other fighters like Tyson and Camacho and, you know, fighters who had their own charisma, you know, that the media market can kind of push a little more and stuff, because that became the thing. But it was interesting to see this era of these fighters that we're talking about. And I agree 100% with Kurt on Gomez. Was always looking sharp, coming in wearing the Puerto Rico colors, man, and the way they put it together on his trunks, because his trunks weren't always the same, but the colors and everything and the design remained pretty close. Always looked sharp like that, and had a great deal of respect for that. Very entertaining. What do you guys think about the Latin fighters and how, you know, that fan base would get with them with their ring entrances, and sometimes they would have, like you said, the bands and stuff like that. That was their way of presenting their fighters, you know, as they came out for these events and everything.
I gotta tell you, to be very honest, the Latin fans, the Latin crowd, the sound, you couldn't hear a pin drop. It's so loud in there. They got that locked down. Like you said, Julio Cesar Chavez, when Rosario used to come to Madison Square Garden, Salvador Sanchez. I mean, you name them, man. They used to bring the crowds out. Puerto Rican fans with Cotto and Trinidad. They used to have Madison Square Garden sold out. Amazing. I remember when Felix Trinidad, when he was fighting Hopkins, when he came out with the police hat and his father had a fireman hat. The music that he was rocking, oh, unbelievable. Had the whole crowd going crazy. Unbelievable. Yeah, they got a good following. They definitely have a good following.
Well, you know, the Latin fans and the fighters are very important to boxing, you know, because of their fighting spirit. You know, I love the intensity, the rivalry. You know, Morales, Barrera. Before them, it was Chacon and Lamont. And then you had, between that rivalry, you had the Battle of the Z-Boys, which was the hard-hitting Alfonso Zamora versus Carlos Alate. You know, that fight was crazy. Their ring entrance, because they hated each other. They hated each other. You know, during the fight and after the fight. And you go watch that fight. Cherry bombs and managers and fathers kicking each other with platform heel shoes on and tight Swedish knit pants, and it was just crazy. Guy coming to the ring with underwears on and white beater shirt and telling the cops, "Wait a minute, he got a message." Boxing, I tell you, man. And but it was a fighter. Maybe Stormy Scrapbook can help me. It was a fighter that used to, when he came out, he used to take roses and give them to women who were sitting in the audiences. Anybody remember that?
Yeah, I remember that. Yeah, who used to do that? Dokes used to do that also, didn't he? Didn't Dokes do
Dokes.
that?
I was just about to say. Dokes had he had a manager. They would bring roses with them to the ring, and they would pass them out.
His name was Marty Cohen.
Yeah, there you go, Marty Cohen. The name was just on the tip of my tongue. Thank you, Scrapbook. But yeah, and that old guy loved Michael Dokes too, man. He actually cried on TV in an interview talking about Michael Dokes. Because Dokes had some problems with substance abuse and stuff like that. But Marty Cohen was like, he really loved Michael Dokes. And that
was the guy with the cowboy hat, right?
Yeah,
the old guy?
Exactly. Yeah. So yeah. But what a memory, because they were giving roses out ringside when Dokes would come out.
Well, just a side note, that Marty Cohen removed Michael Dokes from his will because he had him in his will. He used to own an oil mine. He was very wealthy. He was Marty Cohen. And he removed him because he made a promise to him to get off of the sweet candy, if you will. And he didn't. So, he removed him. But he did love Michael Dokes. He tried his best to really help him.
Yeah. And it is a sad note, It is a sad note on that. But hey, on a more positive note, coming into the modern era of the sport, we had a gentleman who had quite a bit of an aura and mystique about him. in the mid to late 80s coming out there, and people still talk about and fashion him today. And that'd be none other than Iron Mike Tyson. Huh? How about him and his ring entrances? Where he
I was going to bring him up, Stormy.
Yeah, of course we were. You can't get through this without talking about Mike. Mike actually would come to the ring either bare chested or with that torn towel. So go ahead, Scrapbook, and talk to us about Mike and his ring entrances and the power that he had over the audiences.
I went through a lot of Mike Tyson's fights, but when he fought Michael Spinks in 1988, the electricity that night was, to this day, amazing. All you heard was chains, and you couldn't see Mike Tyson when he was coming out. You just seen everybody stand up. Everybody, policemen, everybody stood up, and they were looking in the direction where he was scheduled to come out, because Spinks had already came out. And all you heard was a moaning sound in some little chains. And then eventually you saw Mike Tyson, and everybody was at awe. And you see a guy from where you're sitting. Mike Tyson is a short man, and his head is moving from side to side with an angry look. He had no shirt on. It's the most intense thing that you ever saw in your life. And you can see the fear in Mike Spinks' eyes when Mike Tyson came in, because just the aura of invincibility was in the air. It was nothing like a Mike Tyson fight. If you never saw Mike Tyson live, it's unfortunate. But Mike Tyson, every fight that he ever fought had the same intensity. It was just an aura of invincibility. Amazing entrances that Mike Tyson. All he did was come down the ring, or come down the aisle. But it was just the way his aura was amazing.
Yeah, I was fortunate to see Mike Tyson fight when he was very young, but I like Mike when he came out to Welcome to the Terror Dome. The song fits him perfectly, because as a fighter, you try to, get the song that fits your personality. It makes sense. But, Mike Tyson coming down the ring entrance is like destruction is about to happen. And people think, I can't go nowhere. When that bell sound, when that bell ring, I got to be right there. I don't want to miss nothing. But I used to like when he had the towel around his neck, and my favorite, when he had the belt around his neck, when he was undisputed. And when he when he come in between those ropes, he had that look, pushing his gloves back so his knuckles can, be in the forefront. It's nothing. It was nothing like we ever seen before with a Mike Tyson fight. I'm talking about before a Mike Tyson fight. The black trunks. And for the record, he did wear socks. We just couldn't see him. He said in the documentary, he wore the anklet sock, but we just couldn't see him. The socks, that is, because of the boots. But, there was nothing like a Mike Tyson fight, man, with the music or non-music. It's just him, the scowl on his face, and, you couldn't see him until he hit the steps. People pushing and trying to touch him and all that. You'll probably never see that again.
Curtis, I want to ask you, tell the crowd what it actually felt like what you felt on the inside when you see Mike Tyson come out. The aura, the crowd, Oprah Winfrey, everybody going nuts when they saw this man come out. It was incredible.
Man, I was frozen in time, man, and that was before he became worldwide famous. But people knew him through his reputation. You was, when something is that exciting, it's hard to take in. Sitting in that seat, and you was at the Spinks fight, so I could imagine. So you would know more than what I know when it came to a Mike Tyson fight. But being at a Mike Tyson fight, witnessing a Mike Tyson fight at the theater, because I saw the Tyson Spinks fight at the Fabian Movie Theater in Patterson, man. And when he knocked out Spinks, the aftermath, people lost their mind. They was yelling, and do you think he'll beat Ali? Yeah, I think he'll catch Ali. Mike was like, we didn't expect him to lose no time soon, man. It was just before a fight, during a fight, and after a fight. Mike Tyson is probably top three who had his paws psychologically, his hands on the fight, the influence on the fight like no other. Ali won, maybe Dempsey or the Lewis, but he's up there. So, a Mike Tyson ring interest is like the Lions and the Christians.
I remember when Arsenio was doing his original show, and one night he had Ali, Mike Tyson, and Ray Leonard on. And it was a great show. And they all laughed and talked and kind of, reminisce on the sport and stuff like that. And it was during Tyson's reign as the heavyweight champion. And Arsenio looked over and asked Ali, and this was so great about Ali, he's always been the people's champion and everything and could always entertain a crowd. And, this was, like I said, at the height of Tyson's aura, and mystique. And Ray Leonard was in awe of Mike, what he did in the ring. Now, he probably knew about Mike behind the scenes and stuff because those guys hung out and stuff like that. But Ray had a special love for the way Mike was able to go out there and get rid of people, and he wouldn't let that go unknown. But Arsenio asked Ali, what would happen if you would face him? And Ali put his fist together, like punch his hand, and lay down like he got hit. He was basically saying if he get hit by Tyson, he's out of there. But the whole crowd and audience was laughing, and Ray Leonard was laughing, and Mike was laughing. Mike was embarrassed and put his hands in his face. But Ali was like, "Get hit by him." And Ali slapped his hands together like that, and he laid his head back on the sofa like he was knocked out. He was saying that Ali was saying that Tyson would knock him out, But he was, Ali was just being a ham and just a guy that he knew how to handle people, and it was a wonderful moment. I'll never forget that. And I caught that show live when Arsenio had them on that night. And it was just a great memory where you had those three great champions when they were still in the public's eye at that time, in that era. It was a great, great time. Do you guys remember that?
I remember that. Yes, I do. I do remember that. Yeah, that was something else. Mike Tyson actually was like, no, not me, no, because he was being humble. But Muhammad Ali said, yeah, he would beat me. Now, Ali wouldn't have said that, in his day.
Right.
If Mike Tyson was fighting him at that time. But that was somewhat of a passing of the torch, if you will.
Right. Do you remember that, Kurt? You have anything to say about it?
Yeah, absolutely. I remember I watched that program live with Arsenio Hall. He had Tommy Hearns on there, Ali, Leonard and Tyson, and they both was being humble. That was respect. And I remember Ali said, I remember meeting Mike Tyson. I came to his school and he was a little kid. He had on brown pants and a yellow shirt. Something like that. And, I thought that was hilarious. Ali, I'll tell you. But Mike Tyson, said every tongue must cease, every head must bow. I was great. I'm not vain, but this man was the best. That's what Tyson said.
Yeah, I remember him saying that. Yes.
Yeah, he snuck in saying I was great. I caught that, but that was classic. And Ali, Arsenio Hall, he had the crowd because he asked the crowd, who would win if this man fought this man in his prime? And everybody's like, Ali. So that was my favorite show, man. But, Mike Tyson coming in the ring was unbelievable, man. Especially when he start, throwing punches, people start getting hyped. Mike Tyson was a very polarizing figure, man. And, it's just, I got a love affair and a hate for him because I love how he put boxing on his shoulders, but also he could have even been bigger because when he bit Holyfield in the air, I was so upset. He messed that fight up because he was going to get knocked out. But, he could have even been bigger if he would have had more discipline. But, it wasn't to be. But Mike Tyson ring interest is one of the best.
And let's stop right there for a moment, Kurt. You mentioned something, and I know we're talking about the entrances and the wardrobes and things like that. But let's just go back to that moment that you just mentioned, that when he bit Holyfield's ear, and your disappointment in him, and you were so upset. I felt the same way. I'm certain that Scrapbook felt the same way, because at that very moment, it seemed to take something away from him as a champion and everything, as far as how I could not. I mean, I could believe he did it. Of course, I saw it with my own two eyes. But I had never seen a championship caliber fighter resort to something like that to get out of there. And it's like how disappointing this was. Because remember, people say things like this: they got to carry me out of here. I go out on my shield. I do whatever. Mike refused. It's like he had a mental shutdown and said, to hell with this, because let's not forget, not only did he bite Evander's ear, he bit Evander's ears twice. So, he was told one more time by Mills Lane, and you're out of here. And he did it again. It was a real tremendous letdown. It would be, imagine if Ali did that to somebody, to George Foreman or to Joe Frazier in the Thriller in Manila. Because remember, only Tyson is the other fighter since Ali to have that type of status in the sport as far as respect. Can you brothers comment on that for us, please? And then we can move on.
Who want to go? You want to go, Scrap? Yeah, you always go first, brother.
Yeah, you got to understand, Mike Tyson comes from the streets. And in street life, you don't bring a knife to a gunfight. What I mean by that is anything goes. And his mentality is always that way, just that he had discipline. But he always was that kind of person. So when Holyfield was getting the better of him, Mike Tyson resorted back to the street life. He claimed as though Evander Holyfield was headbutting him. And whether he did or not, that's Mike Tyson's job to prevent Evander Holyfield from continuing to headbutt him. He had no other answers but to do what he did, because Evander Holyfield was taking it to him. Now, what was upsetting to me was that Mike Tyson was having his best round at that moment, but he couldn't control Holyfield. He couldn't fear Holyfield, couldn't back down Holyfield. So he was locked in the corner. And that's the best arsenal he had at the moment, his teeth. Shows the character of what's really on the inside. But that's basically what happened to him.
Yes.
The biggest, somebody said, ask Kurt what's the biggest difference between Holyfield and Tyson. It has nothing to do with throwing a left hook or a right uppercut. It's mental toughness. That was Holyfield's biggest advantage. And that was Tyson, that was his worst, advantage, because Holyfield, you're born with this thing inside you where you have a warrior's mentality. He became cruiserweight champion by beating a tough Kwawi early in his career. He was undisputed cruiserweight champion. Knocked down Mercer, put Mercer in one knee. Holyfield was a piece of steel, man. And Mike Tyson wasn't. Mike Tyson was clay. Mike Tyson is always the puncher. If you go back in boxing history and work your way up, you will see that, so-called tough fighters either quit on a stool or found a way to quit and made up an excuse. In that second fight, Holyfield hurt Mike with a short right hook, and I seen Mike Tyson knees buckle. And that's what Mike said, I'm going to pack it in. He bit, like you said, Stormy, he bit him first time, And Mills Lane said, one more time, you're disqualified. Then he bit him again because he ain't want no parts of Holyfield. He, right then and there, his spirit was broken. You know, see, you could never break Muhammad Ali's spirit. You know, you could never break his spirit. You know, but Mike Tyson's spirit was broken. So he bit Holyfield. And I lost a lot of respect for Mike because mentally, Mike was a very weak fighter. If things didn't go his way, he would quit or he'll regress. You know, the only fight he showed mental toughness because he had Kevin Rooney. That was the Tony Tucker fight. Tony Tucker knocked Mike Tyson, you know, back with an uppercut. Mike Tyson, I gave Tucker the first 4 rounds. And Mike Tyson made the adjustment because of Kevin Rooney. If there's a fighter in boxing who needed a trainer to tell him what to do, like riding a favorite horse in the Kentucky Derby, it would be Mike Tyson because he had problems against athletic fighters. But, you know, Tyson had weaknesses, you know, a lot. And it was mental, you know, and discipline, lack thereof. So, you know, that's what I got to say about it. But Mike Mike had 9 lives because the stuff he got away with and who he is, but the ring interest and the polarizing figure and Darth Vader-like attitude, you know, it got him over. Mike Tyson would never be forgotten, you know, so that's what I had to say about Mike Tyson.
Yeah, thank you for that, brothers, because I wanted to hear what your thoughts were on that since it came up, you know, and it was a moment to kind of cook on that. But we'll return to getting back to these ring entrances. Recently,
Hey, Stormy, can I say one thing if you don't mind?
Sure, go ahead. I'm
Sure,
sorry.
go ahead. I'm sorry. No, that's fine. I just want to get back to that part with Curtis said something very important. Very important. He said when Mike Tyson was in the ring with Tony Tucker, and he got hit with that uppercut, the second round, how Kevin Rooney was able to motivate him. You know what he told Tyson in the corner? He looked at Robin Givens, and he said, Tony Tucker's going home with the champ. You see, sometimes it's the little things that are said to you that mean the most to you that will motivate you. With fighters like Mike Tyson, guys like that. And that's what the key was. He was so in love with Robin Givens, the near thought that she would go home with the champion. And if it happened to be Tony Tucker, that's who she's going home with. He couldn't allow that to happen. And it seemed to me that was the changing of the fight.
Yeah, and he was missing that aspect from his corner after he did away with everybody with the Spinks fight, you know. And he was never able to get back to that type of focus because that's what Kevin Rooney was for him. It's like he could tap into that for him in some kind of way, possibly because he had known him a number of years and knew which buttons to press and everything. So that did become an Achilles for him, having done away with the people who could help him the most.
I'm going to say this too, and this is for the chat, everybody. You know, when I became older, you know, I learned over the course of decade after decade to pick a winner during a fight. You know, look at every aspect, study a fighter, break him down to his very last compound. And then, you know, as the experience came, I start, you know, betting on fights and winning and, you know, even predicting around like I did with Canelo and Khan, you know, predicting upsets. Not like I'm Nostradamus. I'm just like everybody else, but this is the same I'm going to say. People fall in love with punchers. Sonny Liston, George Foreman, you know, the ferociousness of Duran. But the smartest fighter is the toughest fighter. Because when I start looking at boxing as a science, as a neurosurgeon operating on a patient, because that way you can break everything down. Instead of being on the outside looking in, I'm in the inside looking out. That's the difference. And when you're a real boxing enthusiast like I am, then you could do that. Not saying anybody can. No, it don't work like that. But what I'm trying to say is the love that I have for it, that's how I look at boxing. You know, and when you look at history, you know, Jack Dempsey was humbled by a boxer, Gene Tunney. Sonny Liston was humbled, quit. George Foreman was bewildered and bedazzled in Zaire, Africa. You know, because of a scientific boxer. You've seen Chavez complain because he was frustrated. You could see the frustration. You could see Trinidad being out-boxed, out-hustled, out-punched against another scientific fighter, you know, and Hopkins. And I can get many, many more cases, but I'm not. I'm just going to pass the mic. So, you know, that's just how I look at boxing. You know, it's always been a big part of my life. I just had a heartfelt message, you know, but people are always going to go with the puncher because it's very exciting seeing somebody get laid out. And it's going to work against BNC level competition. But once they fight a guy like a Pernell Whitaker or Mayweather, it's curtains.
Yes, sir. Thank you for that too, Kurt. Thank you for those words. There was another fighter that we have in the early 2000s, and that was Bernard Hopkins, the executioner. His ring interests were always quite interesting as well. Bernard Hopkins' ring interests where he would come in with the executioner's mask on and also wearing the hood, and he sometimes would be accompanied by these hooded muscle men with weapons for executions. It's like he had the whole schmeal going, and it was entertaining. And, you know, when he was the middleweight champ, the undisputed middleweight champ, and he held that title and he had a record run, he had come into his own. And he had begun to win fights a lot like James Toney, different ways, you know, taking guys out to sea to drown them, winning battles of attrition, winning battles of where you get knocked down and you get back up because Hopkins has hit the canvas and he get up and win. Can you brothers speak on your recollections of some of Hopkins' best performances as far as like when he came in, like the photo we got right here? We're showing him at his peak when he was doing his thing. Scrap, would you like to go first?
Yeah, I was at a lot of Bernard Hopkins fights. I was at the fight with him and Robert Allen. I was at the fight with him and another fighter. In fact, his very first fight in Atlantic City, he was on an undercard. He was a light heavyweight. He lost his first fight. But he used to come out with these guys. And it would be different guys. It wouldn't be the same guys every fight. Whoever he can get, you know, I guess whoever was the lowest bidder or whatever the case was. But he would get these guys. It would probably be bouncers in clubs or whatever the case was. You want a job tonight? Sure. Throw a hood on them and they would come out. But he was something else. he was something else. Bernard Hopkins was something else. And he came out that way when he fought Roy Jones the first time. And he got out hustled. But
they just didn't mix, man. Those two guys.
Yeah, they fought 3 times. And he kept on. It's like Antoine Eccles never went away. And Robert Allen, another one. Yes. 3 times. Yes. He never went away. In fact, that was in Washington. I was at that fight. As a matter of fact, when that fight was over, Bernard Hopkins, he did a protest. He left the ring because he was trying to prove a point, and he finally came back and he was saying, Curtis and I were talking about this the other day. He was saying how, Curtis, you got he was talking about how how we were not being treated fair, and he was going back in history. and and what was happening was Bobby Ches was supposed to be at the meeting. They had a protest meeting. He didn't show up because he was locked up for DWI. Like, Curtis, help me out with this. I can't get it out.
You talking about when Jim Gray was interviewing him? Yeah, Bernard angrily said, "Where was you when we was getting hit with sticks and water hoses sprayed on us and bitten by dogs?" And Jim Gray had this befuddled look on his face, and Bernard walked off, and I was cracking up. Bernard was a character. Bernard Hopkins, when he lost to Clinton Mitchell at his first professional fight as a light heavyweight, then he went back down, trained by one of my favorite trainers, Bowie Fisher, who taught Naeem Richardson, his understudy. To me, his best performances was against Segundo Mercado in a rematch in DC where he knocked Mercado out. He fought Mercado the first time in Ecuador, and he was dropped twice. But remember, Bernard had a hell of a chin, an A+ chin. So we don't really put him up there when we say best chin, but Bernard had a damn good chin, man. Damn good chin. And he learned how to hide it, when he used to tuck it, and Antonio Tarver, because he moved up in weight, Trinidad and De La Hoya. His biggest fights was after, when he was 36 years old. And after that, when he fought Trinidad, I believe he was 36. But, Hopkins, great middleweight. When he knocked out Trinidad, I said, yeah, you could put him on that list. But those were some of his best performances. See, those fights with Robert Allen and Antoine Eccles, they really groomed them because Eccles and Allen, man, was like a gnat at a picnic buzzing over your face and food. You couldn't get rid of it. And that's best described those two. They weren't stars. Those was hardcore professionals, if you know what I mean. And they weren't afraid of Bernard because Eccles could punch. He was real strong too. He had that country boy strength. So he was a thorn in Hopkins' side, but I truly believe those fights, and he knocked out Joe Lipsy, who had that crazy haircut with that uppercut, and he looked like Frankenstein, and Bernard hit him again and knocked him out. But those are some of the recollections of the great Bernard Hopkins career.
I'm telling you, man, Robert Allen and Eccles, he couldn't get rid of them guys, man.
But you know what? He fought them multiple times. And see, that's another thing that these guys of today can take to heart because, again, sometimes you may have to go out there growing up in the hood or whatever, and not saying the hood, but wherever you are, you're growing up, you may have to face somebody a couple of times before somebody say, okay, I understand, as they used to say. You know what I mean?
Yeah, Hopkins was the epitome of a throwback fighter. Wasn't nothing fancy about him. He just did everything well. He had great teachings from Bowie Fisher, and he became great. Roy Jones caught Bernard at the right time because Bernard was still green. I believe that fight was in D.C. in '93, if my memory serves me well. And, I said, I want to see Bernard, I want to see him fight again 2 years later. I'm going to see what happens. But they fought years later. I mean, they were just a shell of themselves, but Bernard won. But, technically, the only way you can beat Bernard is to out-hustle him. But people forget the young Bernard, when he was unknown, how good he was. Bernard was a heck of a fighter, man. And I think people think of Bernard late in his career with the Trinidads and De La Hoyas and the Tarvers, but I'm talking about a young Bernard when he was going through the middleweight division. Bernard was he was quick, sneaky, very savvy, had a lot of moxie, good power with any punch, defense, tuck his chin, hit you on the hit. He knew a lot of little things, very savvy. So that was Bernard, the execution of Hopkins.
Yes, sir. Yes,
Yes,
sir.
sir. Yes, sir. Yeah, I just want to quickly say Hopkins used to be with Butch Lewis Productions when he first started out, and you don't know that Bernard Hopkins was a middleweight champion in prison. He went to different prison cells and he was the champion. He was always a good fighter, even in the street. He was a very good fighter, so he's very underrated, Bernard Hopkins.
Very true. Very true. Let's move on to another fighter who made his name and fame off of some of these antics of ring entrances and everything. Prince Nassim Hamed. This guy right here, if there was not a character in recent memory for the sport of boxing that you can totally put in the category of ring entrances and wardrobes and stuff like that, it's like he would fit the bill. He's probably the king of that because not only was he doing something in the sport that people liked, and that was he was getting knockouts, but he had a little bit of charisma and he had a little bit of creativity because some thought went into some of the things that he did on his way to a fight. So, just remember, and I happened in this particular moment, I captured his famous flying carpet entrance to the fight. And that whole thing about, people making fun of the people in the, from, Asia, the greater Asia world and Muslim world too. It's like, he came out and he turned it into something that was kind of fire and lit, as far as they say now. What do you guys remember about the Prince and his ring antics coming into a fight? Kurt, can you go with that for us?
I was hearing about this hype job, Prince Nassim Hamed, and the first thing I said, I want to see, does he pass the eye test? He had power because the thickness of his legs, you generate power because of the foundation. When I saw him, I said, he's very unorthodox. And then I've seen him again and again, and I wasn't bowled over. I was not convinced. HBO was hyping him up. The Garden was going crazy when he fought Kevin Kelly because he got under everybody's skin. And Kevin Kelly, because of the warrior's mentality or low ring IQ, got into a firefight with Prince Nassim Hamed. All Kevin had to do was box because he knocked down Prince like 2 or 3 times. I mean, it was a Pier 6 brawl. It was a great fight. It was a great fight. And, Prince Nassim did everything wrong. Lean back from punches. I mean, you ain't Ali or Roy Jones at a certain time in his career that you can get away with that, and he had power. And like I said earlier, he was excited because Adidas gave him a deal. He had a deal. That's why you wore the trunk set Adidas and the shoes, but Marco Antonio Barrera put an end of all that, boxed beautifully, and I never seen a fighter lose confidence so fast because he just gave up his career. He just gave up. And if memory don't serve me right, I believe he killed somebody drunk driving in England. I'm not sure, but I think he did. I think he killed somebody. But anyway, on a lighter note, he brought excitement to the lighter weight divisions, but he was a flash in the pan because after Barrera beat him, he was done. He was done. He lost confidence. He started gaining weight. He just gave up, because he probably said to himself, I took it as far as I could take it, and I'm going to be fighting world-class fighters, not Tom Boom Boom Johnson, no disrespect, not Augie Sanchez. Augie Sanchez was an amateur fighter who one time beat Mayweather, and he knocked him out. That's a brutal knockout if you go look at that fight. But he was a flash in the pan, but you don't get a grade for E for effort. But I'm glad Barrera put a stop to that hype job.
What do you got on him, Scrap?
Yeah, I was at the Kevin Kelly fight at the Garden, and he took forever coming out. Kevin Kelly was in the ring, and we talked about that before Kevin, like 2 nights before the fight. We said we knew what Nassim was going to do. We said, why don't you bring in the card table? You and Phil Borza sit down and play cards as he's going through this nonsense. And then when he does his flip in the ring, you still play cards. But he couldn't resist. He stood on the second ring rope, and he was haunting and telling him to come on inside. He got to Kevin Kelly's head. But that's the kind of person Nassim was. He was the kind of guy that got into your head. He was a razzle-dazzle. Basically, Curtis is saying, it was a hype job. He has some skill. He was a hard puncher, but he was more of a clown than anything else. But he could fight a little something. He could fight. But Barrera took it to him. And that was the end of Nassim after that. I never heard no more from him.
I don't know how some of the American fighters let this guy slip through their grip, man. Because Barrera did exactly what he was supposed to do. And I thought it was going to happen with, what's his name? Tom Boom Boom Johnson. I thought it was going to happen there. I thought it was going to happen with Kevin Kelly. And it's like, they messed up. It's like, but Barrera was like, I ain't playing. And in that one round where he took Prince after he missed a shot and he took him and rammed his head into the ring post. Dude, it was like, Barrera gave him everything and the kitchen sink. I loved it. I was like, why didn't the other brothers do this? It was like, you could see that Barrera had probably, the only other time he may have been that focused was when he was in there with Eric Morales, because he really didn't like that dude either. So it's like, oh my goodness, man. What are you guys recount of that? Well, Kurt just gave his, but Scrap, give us more on that fight between Barrera and the Prince and how the Prince's house of cards came tumbling down.
Well, Emmanuel Stewart didn't want that fight because he knew Barrera. He came in, he was different. He started seeing a lot of changes in Barrera. And he knew that Nassim couldn't handle a fighter like that. So he tried to discourage him from fighting him, but there was something in the contract where Nassim couldn't get away from it. And that was one of the losses of Emmanuel Stewart. He knew Nassim couldn't deal with Barrera. And that's what happened. He got in there, he muscled him around, he slammed him into the ring pad. And, it's like a kid in there with an adult. That's basically what was happening that evening. It's amazing.
Man, it's just to recall this, man, it's just foolish, this that it went on for so long. I was waiting and waiting. You know how they say that train is never late? Well, the train was pretty damn late on that one because I just saw this guy losing as soon as he got in there with a technically sound professional fighter who was a champion. And I was so disappointed in Kevin Kelly because Kevin Kelly almost put that blueprint out there the way he was performing originally, and he got drawn into something that should not have been the case for himself. And it kind of went south on him. But I wanted him to be victorious so badly. I really did. It's just one of those things, man. But
Nassim Muhammad was no match for Kevin Kelly if he boxed him. No contest. Kevin Kelly had too much experience. They were both southpaws, but he had too much experience for him, and he allowed himself to get drawn into that slugfest. It was good for us, but it was bad for Kevin Kelly.
Yeah, absolutely, and I agree with you wholeheartedly on that, man. It just was not, it was not something. But I also wanted to acknowledge one of the fighters that we could actually say when it started coming down to those ring entrances and playing the music and everything, there is a fighter who doesn't get the credit that he deserves, and during his career, he didn't get the credit that he deserved. And that's, the Eastern Assassin, Larry Holmes. Larry Holmes was a heavyweight a little bit ahead of his time with some of the things that he wanted to do, with boxing. One of the things he did was he looked to go through the division. He was basically, 1 through 10, he was fighting everybody. But when he got in there and he was fighting against, the stiffer competition, Larry Holmes started adding music to his ring entrances and stuff like that, And his famous track that he played was Ain't No Stopping Us Now by McFadden and Whitehead, And I was telling Kurt in a conversation and recently I said, I cannot hear that song without thinking about Larry Holmes, because he made it his theme song for when he would come into the ring to defend. He played it when he came out to fight Mike Tyson. He played it when he fought Jerry Cooney. It's like Larry was something else, man. What a hell of a fighter. Loved him as a heavyweight during his title reign. What are your recollections of Larry Holmes and the fact that he was one of those first pioneers to add that ring music to his interests for his title defenses?
Well, Larry Holmes was always one of my favorite heavyweights. And in the 80s, when you really needed a man to step out in the forefront and say, I'm taking over, he was the guy. And when he came out with McFadden and Whitehead, Ain't No Stopping Us Now, that was one of the first fighters to actually, I don't know if he had copyrights or anything, but he owned that record. He owned that record. And he was telling the world, I already took care of Ali, so there's no stopping me at this point. And he meant it. 7.5-year reign. He was he's one of the few fighters that I have that kind of respect for. He took that record and he actually made a lot of money for them, because the more we heard that record, the more, they started making money. But Larry Holmes is something else, man. Ain't no stopping us now. When you heard him coming down the aisle with that record, you knew he meant business.
Yeah, Larry Holmes, man, top 3 heavyweight, and on a good night, he can upset Ali, man. I mean, Ken Norton did. Larry Holmes was a handful, best jab in boxing, in boxing history. Good right hand, Did Larry fight on a aircraft carrier?
Yes, he did.
I remember that fight.
I watched that fight recently, Kurt, about a month and a half, maybe a month ago. I watched that fight.
I remember that it just came up out of nowhere. But, Larry Holmes, man, was a stand-up guy. Larry Holmes he was unapologetic to anything or anybody. I remember him predicting Tyson would be in jail. I remember him diving off the car. He was entertaining without even trying to be entertaining. Larry was just funny, man. The Cooney incident when he knocked out Spinks. Larry Holmes, man, got a lot of respect for it, man. Had a great fighting heart. He was out against Tim Witherspoon in the 9th round, came back to hold on, because that was a good fight. It was a close fight. It was out against Ronaldo Snipes, hurt against Mike Weaver. Larry Holmes had great heart, man. And when a fighter pick a song, they pick it, to the best of their personality. Like Marvin Hagler had Edwin K. Starr, War, and, I always did like that. The younger fighters coming out in hip hop, but those old R&B songs, I love, man. So, Lennox Lewis coming out to Bob Marley and that other instrumental when he started dancing with his arms, or Razor Ruddock coming out to the classic movie, well, the title song from the movie, The Harder They Fall, Jimmy Cliff. So it's just something that goes along with boxing, man. And Mike Tyson, Welcome to the Terror Dome, Roy Jones, Floyd Mayweather. You can go on and on when he had that trashy, filthy records. But, it just seems like hip hop music in general goes along with boxing.
Yeah. And how could you ever forget, even when you look at Larry, and his title defenses and everything, and you can't help but to be reminded of his performances in the ring, But one of the things you may want to remember too is when you hear that song and that's Larry's theme song, you can think about this clip right here that I put up for you guys when Larry was Trevor Berbick in the parking lot, to see the champ go after somebody like that and dive off of a car and kick him with both feet and everything in the public with witnesses and everything. I wonder what Trevor Berbick did. I never found out what Trevor Berbick did to Larry to make him turn into Batman. But do you guys remember that?
Absolutely. He had a cowboy hat and a pair of cowboy shoes. And there you go right there. And he did a flying kick off you see off the car. Larry Holmes had a temperament about him. He really had a temperament about him. And it wasn't just for show. If you did something to Larry Holmes, he'll get back at you. That's a classic right there.
Larry was gangster.
Yeah, but
Trevor was frightened. He was afraid. He told everybody in the media that Larry Holmes is trying to hit me.
Hey, what I like about Larry Holmes, man, he just didn't care, because they interviewed him. He was like, they said, Jerry Cooney is the great white hope. And Larry stared in the camera and said, well, they better hope I don't kill his ass.
Man, that was classic, though. I'm telling you, Larry was something else, man. Larry Holmes was a fighter that you could really support. You could really get behind him, man, because he was the real deal. And for so many years, because he had followed on the heels of Ali, who was charismatic over basically two eras, he did it the right way too. Larry didn't get in trouble, outside of the ring. He didn't get arrested and stuff like that. And, he was a champ and he was defending titles and whooping dudes' butts in the ring. And with 20 title defenses, he beat people in a variety of ways. He had vulnerabilities and people would get at him and he still come back and persevere. Dig deep.
Let me say this.
And beat him.
Let me say this real quick, Stormy. Larry Holmes is probably the most hard luck fighter in boxing history, because you came between Ali and Tyson, two of the most popular fighters ever to grace the ring in boxing history. It was Ali, and then there was Holmes, and then there was Tyson. So timing is everything in life, and you can't beat that. That's hard luck. That's just bad timing for you to come between two of the most exciting and polarizing figures in boxing history. But Larry Holmes, yeah. I was thinking about that. I said, you know what? That's hard luck. That's bad timing. People don't understand. People underestimate timing in life. you know, and Holmes, great fighter. Look at Holmes versus Ozzy Ocasio when he knocked him out with jabs. You want to see him gut a victory out. Look at Carl the Truth Williams fight. You want to see a guy who got knocked out by Ernie Shavers, and get up. Look at that fight, or I'd say Ronaldo Snipes and Tim Witherspoon, where he was out on his feet. I still don't know how he survived. He was out for the whole round, and he survived. But that's Larry, man. I've been looking at a lot of Larry Holmes fights, man. But the guy had a great heart, but it was just hard luck. Where it was Ali, and he was sandwiched in the middle, Ali and Tyson.
Well, it's interesting that you say that, Curtis, because both Larry Holmes and Marvin Hagler started their careers in 1973, and they both had the same problems. That's amazing.
Yeah, that was. But we have such a rich history in this sport, and the fact that we could talk about what the subject that we had for this evening's show, it speaks to the notion of boxing is something else, man. It has its own lifeline in professional sports.
Beautiful.
Yes, and it's like I never tire, never tire of it, man. That Booker T. Ward mentioned early in the show. Now, Booker T. Ward may not have gone on to greater heights in the sport, but he will be always remembered for what he did to Anthony Hembrick, man. And the Hembrick train really slowed after that. It was like that was the beginning of the end. But it was amazing. And please, as a recommendation for everybody out there that's listening that has not seen that fight, Anthony Hembrick against Booker T. Ward, please go and check that fight out. You're going to see. Yes, sir.
That was in Anthony Hembrick's hometown.
Yes.
It was a homecoming for him. And tell everybody, wasn't that just as good as Motown? That performance was amazing.
That dude was doing the electric slide and everything, choreographed with his corner men and everything. I thought I was watching New Edition. You understand? You could have put, matter of fact, try it. Watch the film and play New Edition. Is it really love or something? Why he doing that? And I'm telling you, it looked like the dude was practicing his moves to join the group or something.
And I want to say something. Boxing is very difficult to go to a high level because you have fighters. You may not know them. You had a knockout artist from Venezuela named Ingles Pedroza in the early 90s, knocking out everybody. So the guy, he was fighting the American dude, and the guy decided, I'm going to let him punch himself out. And Ingles Pedroza was landing these punches, but they was blocked. But to us, it was landing because he was knocking everybody out. He was like 19-0 with 19 knockouts, something like that. Something crazy. He used to wear these fancy trunks. And people like, oh, we got something here, something special. Boy, that brother started to box. When he started to box, you thought you was looking at Pernell Whitaker and Aaron Pryor. I was laughing because it was the punishment along with Ingles Pedroza throwing hard punches and not landing. He missed the punch and fell on his face, and the referee counted him out. Man, you talk about somebody laughing, and you got fighters like Andy the Hawk Price, who was managed by Marvin Gaye, who was a up-and-coming fighter, and he fought Sugar Ray Leonard, and people were saying it's going to be a tough fight for Ray. And Ray went out there and knocked him out in one round. You got fighters like Eddie Hobson, who had fast hands. Certain fighters' career, they don't pan out. You can have skills and talent, but it takes a lot more than that. Quincy Taylor, Sugar Ray Leonard boy, I think he I think he fractured Ray ribs or knocked. They were saying he knocked Ray out before the Hagler fight, but that was hearsay. There was never no proof. But that was his claim to fame, Quincy Taylor. So when you talk about, fighters like Alex Ramos and Francisco Bajado, these were fighters destined to be great, or if not good, but their careers never panned out. I know as boxing fans, we're hard on fighters, man, but it's not easy to go to that next level, man, because you got to have something inside you that you want to be great, man. And like Leonard Hearns and all those guys, Purnell and Floyd, all of them, it's something inside them that drives them to be great. Even a great Roberto Duran, as special and great as he was, you got to remember something. He quit in one of the biggest rematches in history. So when a fighter loses hope and faith and his spirit is broken, he may quit on the stool, just walk out the ring. It happens. I done seen it all. So, you got to keep that in mind. I just wanted to get that point across.
Yeah. So, Kurt, why don't you go ahead, brother, and give us some final words and thoughts, and then we'll go with Scrap. Kurt?
Yes, sir. I'm here.
Yeah, so why don't you go ahead and give us some final words and thoughts, and then we'll go to Scrap.
Yes, sir. Great show, fellas. Good job, Stormy B, man. Scrap, great job, man. As always, man. I love this show. We try to have the purest show. Just talking about boxing. We're not trying to knowledge anybody. We just love talking about the sport of boxing and fighters that no other channel talks about. We try to keep their names relevant. I done talked to some fighters. Shout out to Trick Nolte. We have interviewed some fighters like Chris Bird and so on, man, and they don't want to be forgotten. They glad when we call them and want to interview. So I'm just happy, man. I love boxing, man. Boxing is my life. And just like my ex-girlfriend said, 2001, she said, boxing will always be your real girlfriend and wife. And I told her, I said, you goddamn right. I didn't shy away from it. You damn right. I done broke up with women over boxing. I take it very serious. I spent a lot of money collecting T-shirts and boxing DVDs, man. And being on this boxing YouTube, I never thought you could be in your living room and talk boxing with people around the world. So, shout out to the chat. But Lawrence Williams asked me a question about Prince Nassim Ahmed title defenses, but I forgot one thing, Lawrence. He was a multiple champion. If you count all the defenses, I don't know. I'm a guess. Maybe 17. I don't know. I'm just guessing, but, he was beating up B and C level competition. I'm guessing 17 altogether. I could be wrong, but, Trick Nolte was in there, Lawrence Williams, Lala D. Shout out to everybody, underrated doctors in the chat, man. I just want to say, thank y'all, man. And, YouTube, boxing on YouTube, man. We got a good thing going, man. I could talk another 10 minutes because I'm so hyped. I'm feeling 100%. I'm feeling like my old Kurt Sugar self, but I'm going to pass the mic. I'll be on here till 2 in the morning, so I'm going to pass it to Scrap.
Yeah, thanks a lot, fellas, man. As usual, man, beautiful show. I want to thank Lawrence Williams, man. Lawrence Williams and Lala D and Trick Nolte, Underrated Darkness, D-Style, my brother D-Style Boxing, Drew Titan. Everybody that supports us, man, Battle Rifle, everybody that supports us, I really want to just shout y'all out. And thank you for giving us your time. We're on this program because we want to give something back to boxing. And, that's what we do every single week. And we appreciate your time with us. And thanks a lot, Stormy and Curtis, man. I'll talk to you guys soon. Salute.
Oh, man. And I want to say thank you to you two brothers, for collaborating with me with this project here and helping to bring to mind and bring to center and up front what the sport of boxing really means to us and for our audience that follow us, because there's so much out there that's available, but at the same time, we have the patience and the time and the willingness to talk about the subjects and to reminisce and to bring to light certain things and to recall others. And it's just a great feeling to be able to work with people like yourself and those who are supporting us out here in the chat, because there's so much more. We haven't even scraped the tip of the iceberg when it comes to talking about boxing. But I'm glad to be a part of this process with you and to be on the journey. And I like the fact that the audience is really supporting us as well, because people are starting to come around and say, like, wow, we want to hear what you got to say. And I love the chat, the interactions, and how everyone is like finding things that they can take from what we have to offer. And that's very gratifying. I look forward to more shows and what we can do in the future. And I hope that we can continue to bless and be blessed with this content. But it has been a wonderful talk. It has been the three wise men of boxing, ring entrances, and wardrobes. And we went a little bit more than that in depth with some of these fighters, events, and situations that took place. So it's been great recalling that for this show. I want to say thank you to everybody in the chat that joined us this evening. Smash the like button if you haven't done so on your way out. I want to say shout out to the LDBC, and I hope that we can be back again for another episode and keep cooking on the sports. So for my brothers Scrapbook Boxing and Kurt Sugar, we're going to say good night to you guys. Thanks for listening in. And we'll catch you next week, same time, Thursday night, 8 p.m. Central. Peace out.
Peace.
Peace.
And I recognized that early on, because there's just, Tommy Morrison fought a lot of the guys on his way up that Mike Tyson fought, and he got a lot of the similar results that Mike Tyson got. So,
that Buddy Bear fight was something else. He had him do a 360. Joe Louis hit him so hard that Buddy Bear did a 360. That's a hard punch, because Buddy Bear was over 6 feet. Brutal punch, Joe Louis. I mean, his brother Max Bear. Joe Louis hit him with a triple left hook. That ended it for Max Bear. Max Bear could take punches. In fact, Max Bear was said to have been the greatest right-hand puncher as a heavyweight.
But there was a lot of intrigue in that fight. I thought it was 55-45. But Ray Mercer has one of the best chins you will ever see. He has a granite chin. And that fight, he was taking some shots.
I knew Ray Mercer could take a good punch, but Tommy Morrison's left hook was something that was a little bit special, because